Hi, everybody. How are you?
Got a big crowd today. That's fun.
I know, that is fun. Thanks for joining us, guys. Well, today we have Lindsey Johnson on, who is the founder of Weezie Towels. We've been so excited and talking to her for a few weeks. We have on our Weezie robes today. It's very exciting. So anyway, if you are not, if you have not been on a Wealth It Wednesday call because you're not a member yet, this is something that we do. We usually feature just an interesting woman with a really cool story. And so we were so happy to have Lindsey join us and tell us the story of Weezie. I know that I don't have like a particular towel brand that I have an affinity for, or I didn't until Weezie. And so she really has filled an interesting place in the marketplace. And what I really love about her story from getting to know her before the call is she has a lot to share with female entrepreneurs about, particularly as her background's in venture capital. So I don't want to steal too much of your thunder. Keep your lines on mute if you can. Were automatically muted. But if you have a question, use the chat feature in the bottom, and we will make sure to have Lindsey answer it before we leave the call today. So, and make sure to stay till the end because we have a fun discount code for you too, which is so exciting. All right, Lindsey, take it away.
Well, I'm happy to introduce myself. So I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I think that we were supposed to start off by just telling you a little bit about myself personally. But so I was based in New York before COVID happened, and just recently moved to Atlanta, actually. So it's been a little bit of a crazy couple months, not only because of, professional craziness given COVID, but also personally. I also just had a baby a couple months ago too. So we are kind of just now trying to figure out our new normal, but I'm very glad to be here. So thanks for having me.
We are so excited to have you. And I personally, I love your story about how the business came about, because it is just, I actually, this morning over breakfast, I was telling my girls who we were interviewing today, and I told them your story because I said it's just so fun to see how oftentimes businesses are born out of needs that you see, and the people that are brave enough to go out there and be like, I'm going to fill that need. So can you share a little bit about how Weezie came about?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So it was really, so I co-founded the business with one of my best friends, Liz, who I see is also listening in today. But it really was born out of a personal need that she experienced when she was going to pick out towels from her wedding registry. So anyone who knows, who's been through the registry process, it's very overwhelming, and you're trying to figure out what you want to, purchase for your new life. And she had so many different options, particularly in the towel space. So she was at a big department store, and there's 100 different brands, and each brand has 20 different types of towels, and the price points are everything from like $10 a towel up to $110 a towel. And she just found it to be very overwhelming. And when she sort of sought help with the person who worked at the store, didn't get a lot of great answers from them in terms of why is a towel $10 versus $110? What is the quality I'm looking for? Which towel should I buy? Which brand is best? What cotton is best? Like, what do all these words mean? What is all this jargon? And when she ultimately settled on a brand that was recommended to her by her mother, and actually got the product, she was super disappointed with not only the quality, but also just the design and the aesthetic of the product. So she ended up getting one of the more expensive brands that a lot of people know. And I think you would think would have a super high quality and high performing product, especially for the price point. And she just found that the whole experience just really fell flat. And so she reached out to a group of girlfriends, asking for a towel brand recommendation, of which I was one of them. And no one had a great answer, no, especially I did not at the time. And that, sort of small question, does anyone have a great towel brand to recommend, sort of snowballed and brought us to where we are today. So definitely wasn't in our plan, I think, to my personal plan to start a business. I wasn't looking to start a company before Liz sort of came banging down my door with this idea that we kind of couldn't let go once we had talked about it.
Yeah, so tell us about the early years, what it took to start Weezie, get it off the ground, and, just for any entrepreneurs that we have on the call, sharing as much detail on those early years would be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny, like, you know, we launched the business October of 2018, but we had been working on it for almost 2 full years before the launch. So nothing happens overnight. I think that when you look at the press or social media or whatever it might be, I think a lot of, you know, times you get the impression that people are an overnight success or companies are an overnight success. And I think it's so important to remind yourself that that's oftentimes not how it happens. And there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes and leading up to that, those big moments. And so for us, it was a struggle. I mean, we both were working our butts off, and Liz had a full-time job. I was actually based in New York while she was living in Savannah. I, at the time, was a full-time business school student and also had 3 internships on top of my business school that I was doing while trying to start the company. So Liz also got pregnant during all of this. So, I mean, we were juggling a lot. But I will say, you know, the nights are long, the mornings are early. But I think you kind of have to put in those hours, because if you're not willing to kind of put in those long nights and early mornings and kind of squeeze work in, you know, every which place you can at the beginning, then you're probably not doing the right thing. I think just it kind of just shows how passionate you are about the idea, and that can kind of give you the confidence. If you wake up in the morning thinking about it and you go to bed at night thinking about it, you can kind of tell yourself, okay, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And, you know, that passion and that excitement that we had kind of carried us through, despite which, you know, it being pretty crazy.
I know we tell people, we talk about it all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
you hear these people say, like, make sure to establish a ton of boundaries. I'm like, in
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, there are no boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't found one yet with the Wealth Edit.
No.
It's just been like 24/7, which is fun if you love it. So
Exactly. It's kind of, you have to look at it almost like a hobby. So how did you make the decision to quit day jobs and go into this full time? Like, how did you make that decision timing wise?
It's a tough one. I think it's very unique to every person and every company. So I would caution that I don't want to give like blanket advice, because it's different for everyone. Everyone's, you know, financial situations are different. And like your current job, you know, might be easy to manage both. It just kind of depends on what you're doing. But for us, we really had sort of like a natural timeline in that I started business school in January. I actually did like a accelerated track. So I started school in January. Liz approached me around February with the idea. And we worked on it for, I want to say like 7 or 8 months, while, you know, she was working full time and I had a couple internships on top of school. And when we kind of realized, you know, there weren't enough hours in the day to get everything done that we needed to get done, and that we were dropping the ball and kind of moving the ball forward. So we would notice that like we kind of just felt like we were wearing handcuffs essentially, and we were doing the business a disservice by splitting up our time among so many different priorities. And if we wanted to give the business a real chance, we had to focus. And kind of what that meant for us was, you know, getting rid of other responsibilities. It is a really scary leap of faith, especially when you're giving up income. So I would say that again, it's different for everyone, but making sure that you're kind of cognizant that one day you will have to go without an income. And even once we launched the business, we went without an income for over a year. And I think that is just something you have to plan for and save for, and be cognizant of that, like nothing is an overnight success. And so it's definitely, it's different for everyone, but it's, at the end, I think I think you're kind of doing yourself a disservice, or your business a disservice rather, to kind of be moonlighting, doing it both, or, you know, multiple things at once. You're kind of, at some point you have to take the leap of faith, because you just really aren't giving the business a chance otherwise.
yeah, that's a really good word. So when did you hire your first employee?
So our first employee was actually an embroiderer that we hired before we even launched the business. And so that he came on probably, you know, 3 or 4 months before we launched, just to like make sure we had everything ticked and tied on the ops front. And then after we launched, we brought someone on probably a couple months afterwards. I would say, again, it's unique to every person and every business, and whether or not you have a partner and all those things. But for us, I think we loved doing every single part of the business at the beginning. Like we were the ones like packing the orders and putting the tape on. I mean, just figuring out like how, this is going to sound so silly now, but like, you know, we would say like, how do the orders come in on a website? Like the orders come in and then like what happens from there? Like who does what? Like where do we store this? Like setting up the warehouse, setting up the embroidery operations, just like every little thing, customer service, package gets lost. How do you track down a lost package? Just every little thing that comes up once you launch the business. we felt it was important that the two of us do everything, at least once, if not 1,000 times, so that if we did hire anyone, we felt comfortable and confident in kind of showing them how things should be done or can be done, whatever it might be. So I think for us, it was master everything at the business. And then again, hit that point of like where we felt we were wearing handcuffs and got to the point where you just can't do it all, right? There's not enough hours in the day. And like, we were feeling like we were falling short on, marketing opportunities, or we couldn't deliver, awesome customer experience because it was taking us a long time to get back to folks or whatever it was. You just kind of have to get outside help. So we had a couple interns join us, and then we took a full-time person probably 3 or 4 months after we launched to focus really on our product, which is to us is just so important. And dealing with factories overseas is a 24/7 job, and that was kind of taking over. We were splitting it, but it just was taking over our lives. And so got someone in the product to help us out. And since then, we've grown the team to it's almost 30 people now, when you include the whole ops team. So it's pretty crazy what's happened in a year and a half.
Yeah. Well, it's really fun. As we've talked to like different entrepreneurs over the course of doing this Wealth Edit Wednesday, it's been neat to watch. There's sort of a process there as you're building your business. You have your idea, you start building, then you make that decision to go into it full time. Then you make that decision to hire your first employee. And then oftentimes what we're seeing is the next decision is, okay, now we're growing. We have, a need for more employees or more capital. And I know you said earlier with your business background, you had experience with the early stage funding and kind of you had knowledge of that and how that was used. How did y'all decide whether or not to take outside funding with Weezie?
Yeah. And again, I would caveat with my answer, it's just it's so specific to every business and every business owner, really, kind of what you want out of the business and what you're hoping to do with the money and all of that. But I think for us specifically, we really wanted to do as much as we could on our own. So we bootstrapped the business for almost a year. And that was really important to us to sort of prove that this was a viable business, right? Like I said, things don't happen overnight. So we wanted to give the business a chance by, putting money into it that was our own money, but really, not sort of like artificially inflating the success of the business by, injecting a ton of capital. So we wanted the business to actually create profits and then use those profits to fuel the growth of the business. So we did that for about a year, and our intention, we kind of went in with an open mind about fundraising, whether or not we would take outside capital or not eventually. But once we hit that year mark, again, we hit that point. I keep using this, expression, but we felt like we were running the business with handcuffs because, there were things that we wanted to invest in inventory. We were selling out of products, left and right, and we couldn't actually afford to buy the products to bring them in because it takes a long time for them to get to us. And so we needed to, working capital to actually purchase inventory to sell. And if we were going to put money into inventory, then we also wanted money to be able to market it, right? So spend money on marketing. We wanted to be able to hire people to help us with those efforts. So we kind of got to a point where we saw, we were, turning a profit, but it wasn't something that was necessarily going to allow us to grow what we thought we could do, to our potential. So with that in mind, we did seek outside funding. But what I think we did a little bit differently, especially for relative to the direct-to-consumer businesses that are in New York, which is where I've been, is that we really did not want to raise from venture capitalists. And I would say it's a total personal decision what you want to do here. But for me, having come from that world, I just knew that there's a lot of stipulations that come with outside funding. So you just have to find the right partners. It has to be people that are aligned with your vision. You're aligned with what the capital is going to be used for. And for us, venture capital to us, at least some of the ones out there means that, there is an expectation of, what I would consider exponential growth. And I think we love to grow, and we're, kind of always pushing ourselves to grow. But when you have a working capital business like ours, we're actually purchasing inventory, and you have that as an asset on the balance sheet, it's really hard to grow as quickly as a venture capitalist might want you to grow, and preserve, a great culture and preserve, the path to profitability and all these things that we cared about. So we wanted to grow. We just wanted to grow at our own pace. And so what we did was raise what I would say is a smaller amount of money relative to what you might see from these big venture capitalist rounds. And we raised from what we would consider to be friends and family and friends of the brand. That could really help us and advise us, but weren't necessarily pushing us to grow at all costs. They kind of let us make our own decisions and grow at our own pace, which has been great. So I think it's just so important to, if you do decide to take outside funding, just know what strings are attached and what you're getting yourselves into, and make sure it's with the right partners who are aligned with, how you see the business growing.
And since you have a background in venture capital, tell us some of the mistakes that you've seen people make, or if women are faced with this decision in their business, are some of the mistakes you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky. So it's like we make mistakes all the time at Weezie, and I think it's one of those things that are learning opportunities for us. But I've seen, friends of mine raise, I would say, too much money, which I think everyone kind of wants that big number. And once you have that money, there's a lot of press that comes with it. It's really exciting, but then you actually have to spend it and spend it smartly to make that return, right? So there's a lot of pressure that comes, like every additional dollar you raise is another dollar that you have to figure out how to spend and how to spend to make it 10 times or whatever the return is that your investors are looking for. So I think just raising the right amount of money, it's not always the right move to raise as much as you can get. We actually had additional interest and decided to close down our round early because we knew that we didn't need it. And so that I think is really important. I think, like I said, vetting the partners is really important, finding someone who is aligned with you and who trusts you as the owner and owners, I should say, and that, kind of aligns with our vision for how we want to grow the business. And I think just, I think assuming that you need to raise outside money is also a mistake. I think a lot of people think because, peers are raising money that they should also raise money. I mean, my personal belief is if you can build your business in the time horizon that you want to build it in without taking external capital, like do it. Because you preserve ownership, right? And the more ownership that you have, the more you can control your own destiny. And I think that's just so important when you're building a business. Like, you don't want to wake up one day and realize that you're not, the person kind of like leading the charge in terms of where the company is going. So Liz and I wanted to make sure that we raised enough capital to allow us to grow and flourish what we think Weezie's potential is, but not so much that we were no longer sort of controlling our own destiny, if you will.
That's great advice. And I think it's something that it's not talked about a lot. So thank you for sharing that. I know that probably provided a lot of great guidance for some of our listeners. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit, because what initially attracted me to your brand, and I ended up buying towels based on your Instagram marketing, and I love the towels. And I told Lindsey this, I have 2 teenage daughters, and I bought the towels to go in my guest bathroom for my guests so that they had nice towels, because all of our towels were ratty, and now they go down there and find them and bring them up so they can use them. So huge testament to the quality of the towels. But y'all have nailed marketing. I mean, all your pictures are crisp and clean. You can tell that your followers love you. So tell us how y'all approached marketing from the beginning. Like, what was your thought process, and did you have help thinking that through, or kind of what was your approach?
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. I think marketing is one of those things that I have to give, with credit to my co-founder, who I wish I could like call on in this video, because I know she's listening here. So her background was as a creative. So she was the creative director at Bustle, which is a media group in New York. So she, was trained educationally wise as a graphic designer. She has an amazing design eye. And I think both of us feel so strongly that brand and cohesive brand is so important. And I think building a brand, whether, be from the photography you're doing or the packaging you're creating or the copy that you use, all be very cohesive so that someone does recognize us, oh, that's Weezie, to the product you make. So I think everything we do, we want to make sure is cohesive. And it was something that we spent a lot of time on before we launched. So that's what I would say in terms of making sure that everything that comes from your company is cohesive across all facets, from the way the customer experience person is chatting with the customer to the inserts in the packaging. It just makes, I think that much more of an impact on the consumer when everything sort of speaks together and works together. So I think spending that time on the brand, which is it's a hard process, right? I think Liz obviously has an amazing design eye, but going through like little things like the copy and how do we talk about ourselves and all those things are just such important conversations to have before you launch publicly, because you'll get it time flies and all of a sudden you like I think I was chatting with you guys about Instagram. I mean, you have to have just like a library of stuff built up because time, like your followers want posts, right? So we're posting 1 or 2 times a day. At the beginning, I think it was twice a day. And they want that consistency, but they also want variety. And so kind of having that content library built out before launch, I would say is so important as well, just so that you're not scrambling every day. Like, what are we going to post? What should it be about, et cetera. And I think Liz would say it's all about testing. So I think like you might think, okay, like these memes are really funny or whatever it is, and you might try them and say, okay, that's not really resonating with our audience. So you just have to stay nimble because you can plan all this content out, like I was just talking about, 30 or 60 days or however long it is in advance. And then you might realize that your followers might not resonate with it the way that you thought they would. And then you just kind of need to pivot and just stay nimble and flexible with it. In the early days, and in terms of our Instagram following, we worked with a lot of other brand partners, which I think was super helpful. I think we've been so fortunate and lucky that there's so many great founders and great businesses out there. And like, we all just lean on each other, especially the ones who've launched around when we did, and, saying, hey, we're going to do a photo shoot in a bathroom. So we're going to shoot, we'll take some Glossier products. We'll take an Otherland candle. We'll take, just little bits and pieces, like an artist that we love, and put her picture in the background, and then tag all of the brands, send them the images and say, hey, we took this like beautiful picture if y'all want to post it. And then they will probably tag you back. So just like creative little things like that to get your name out there at the beginning make all the difference for sure.
Yeah, this is, well, y'all have just done an excellent job. Am I on mute? Y'all, I was telling Lindsey before the call that we're in Beaufort, South Carolina, and we have F-35s that we call the Sound of Freedom here, but they are so loud that they just monopolize the call shoot.
When at least 20 have gone by while we've been on this call. 20. So I've never heard this many. Lindsey, I loved the story about the camel. And I loved that's just a great illustration of how much thought y'all put into every little thing. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our logo, for those who don't know, is a camel, and it's like a resting kind of camel laying down. And it's really meant to be a nod to our product. So camels are the most absorbent mammal on the planet, and they also have like a thick, soft coat. So it's just supposed to speak to the fact that we have very absorbent towels. They're super soft as well. And we did it in sort of like this very relaxed looking kind of face, or I don't even pose, I guess you should say, which I think kind of speaks to our brand is meant to be very easygoing and laid back and not too fussy.
Yeah,
I love that.
So great. Well, COVID-19 has presented all businesses with challenges. Can you kind of just walk us through, some of yours, how this has affected your business and how y'all have managed some of those tough spots?
Yeah, I will be honest, it has been a wild roller coaster. Lots of ups and downs since COVID-19 hit. I think for us, we've seen impacts, both at the beginning, our supply chain was very impacted. So we do our manufacturing overseas in Europe. And obviously the crisis was there before it was here. We also have a lot of our packaging products coming out of Asia, which was very much impacted. So we had product that was, we had paid for that we weren't able to ship across. So we were selling out of things quickly. Things were getting held up at the port because there were, the workers weren't staffed in the normal way that they're usually staffed. In our own facility where we do all of our own fulfillment and customization, we had to make a ton of different changes, obviously, just to be compliant with CDC recommendations of 6 feet apart and making sure everyone wears masks and temperature checks. And changing all of that operation in such a short amount of time was really difficult, especially when I actually had like a 2-week-old baby or a 1-week-old baby, and I was in New York, so I couldn't get down to where our operation was. So it was really, I think, challenging just trying to manage all of that remotely and just making sure that everyone stays safe, right? I think that it was obviously the number one goal. And it's really hard when you have like customers who are ordering, who their number one goal is to get their stuff in their hands. And then like we're trying to protect our employees while also servicing customers. So it was really difficult at the beginning. But I will say that I was so impressed with our team, and everyone just kind of came together and worked together to get through it. And now we have everything sort of, at least in today's recommendation world, everything's kind of working smoothly. But I'd say COVID-19 has allowed us to sort of rethink a lot of things too. So we are obviously, our corporate team is working from home right now. I can tell I'm not in an office. And I think that's something that, we'll continue to embrace, that flexibility if people want that, which is great. And I think it's just checking in on everyone and making sure that we can preserve the culture of our business when we're all, kind of on an island, if you will, having Zoom calls as many times as we can and things like that, I would say are really the silver lining, if you will.
What do you see as the future for Weezie, and how can we help in any way?
I love that question. So I always like to say, we don't have a crystal ball. So it's like so hard to predict the future, but we are just so excited about all the fun things we have planned in terms of our growth and partnerships. And I think the sky's really the limit for us. And so our goal is to really be like the preeminent go-to luxury towel and bath brand in the US. So I would say the sky is the limit. We have a lot of fun new products launching this year, which I'm so excited about. Another thing COVID impacted was having to push all of our product launches, but we're kind of now getting back in the swing of things. So have a lot of fun stuff coming this fall, and we're just excited to kind of keep growing and see where this all goes.
Well, we're so excited to watch and see what's launched and what's new. And slowly, I hope to replace all the towels in my house with yours.
I love that.
I do.
That's my goal too. Okay, so we're gonna open up. We have a few questions from people on the call. So the first is on the startup side and in the beginning. How did you approach sourcing quality materials and establishing a consistent supply chain? And how did you go about finding the right global factories? That's a great question, Ivy.
Yeah, supply chain is so important. I think, as I mentioned, our first hire on the corporate team was a product specialist. So product is so important. I think that you can build a great brand and a great following, but people aren't going to come back unless you have a great product. So I think you just have to start there. So for us, what that meant was really kind of doing a ton of customer research and getting feedback on what it was we were trying to create, right? That is step one. So you have to know what you're looking for in terms of the suppliers, and you can't really know that until you nail down exactly what it is you're trying to make. So we were trying competitor towels and writing out, this is what we like about this one, this is what we don't like about this one. I packed 2 huge suitcases of those towels, and I went to a textile show with 90,000 vendors in Frankfurt, Germany over my business school winter break, as one does. And Liz was literally giving birth, so she couldn't come with me, and we were on a budget, so I stayed in the hostel because I booked it last minute. It was an experience, but I was there for 3 or 4 days, and met with, it had to have been 100 vendors, and I would go meet with them and open up my suitcases and say, this is what I want to make. And everyone would say, okay, you're crazy. What company are you with? I've never heard of you. And we already have a product that's just what you're describing. And every time someone would give me something, I would say, no, I'm trying to create a new product. If what we wanted existed, we wouldn't be starting the company. So finding a manufacturer that was willing to take me seriously and take a chance on us, even though I had a fake business card with the company name, which was something totally different than Weezie on it. And then, finding someone who was willing to work with us, but then also was open-minded to creating a new quality, because what we wanted didn't exist yet. So it was truly kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. But I think that process, while painstaking at first, is so important because, like I said, if you can't sort of hang your hat on your product and stand by your product's quality, you're going to lose customers over time. And it's you worked so hard to acquire them and to get them in sort of to the family and follow you on Instagram or get them on your email list, that you want to be able to retain them with a great quality product. So for us, we found a 3rd generation owned factory, family owned factory in Portugal. And we work with a Japanese spinning mill on actually creating the cotton into yarn. So it's super high quality. And I literally when I found them, I just had this feeling it was them. And if you'd believe it, out of all those meetings, it was my very first meeting, which is kind of crazy. I still went through all the other meetings just because you never know. But I actually booked a ticket while I was in Germany to go to Portugal. I like followed them home and I was like, I'm going to go to this factory because I need to get my eyes on this. So I think you'd need to get there in person. I feel that way at least. I just think it's so important to see where your product is coming from and make sure you're kind of just checking that everything is what they say it is, and just had like an amazing few days with them, and we really saw eye to eye on kind of what our vision was for the business. And you want to think of them as less of a supplier and more of a partner is what I would look for. So we text all the time, and when they come over to the States and we go over there, it's really fun getting to spend time with them. It's just as much fun as it is work. So that relationship is so important. We've since expanded and worked with other factories as well, but I think that first one is so important that you get it right and that you kind of just constantly iterate on that as well. So our first product we put out into the world is constantly tweaking and getting better over time. So
that's awesome. And then Molly, I know you have a question. You had your hand raised. Do you want to unmute your line? And it might be a question, Lindsey, for your business partner. So if she's on the line, she can unmute her and respond to. We can phone a friend. So Molly, do you want me to unmute you, or you got it?
I think I've got it. Thank you, Lindsey. And I went and typed it out too. But I'm just curious. I agree that y'all do a phenomenal job with marketing and digital marketing. And I just love to know, as you've grown, if you've worked with a third-party digital marketing agency, and would love any feedback on your experience with that.
Yeah, so we have done this a lot of different ways. So the first piece of advice I would have on paid digital marketing, so actually paying, to Facebook to place ads and sponsored ads in people's feeds for Instagram. We did not do that for probably 4 or 5 months when we started. And I think that for us, that was the right decision because we wanted to see what we could sort of do organically, right? So what could we sort of like drum up in terms of demand from our organic social following? And what could we drum up through PR and kind of partnerships and all those things? So we really wanted to sort of see what we could do without spending money on customer acquisition in a traditional sense. And once we did start spending money, my recommendation was start small. And the first thing we did was work with an agency. So I interviewed probably, I have to say 10 agencies. All were recommended to me by other founders. And this was a world that was very new to me. So I just asked a ton of questions and tried to get to the bottom of, how they're charging you, what does success look like, what are your objectives, like what budget makes sense for you, and all those things you kind of figure out through that process. And the first agency we worked with, I think, was probably a bit bigger than we should have gone in terms of, because I was new and learning, I wanted to be very involved and I wanted to kind of have my hands on everything, and they were used to just like having a client give them money and they spit out results and say, this is what happened. That did not fly with us. So I
that experience too.
Yeah. So I worked with them for probably 6 months, which I think was the contract. Learned a ton. Definitely had success in terms of like the return, but wanted that more kind of hands-on relationship. So moved from them, and I'm speaking specifically for Instagram right now, or Facebook and Instagram, I should say. We have other channels as well, but we moved over to a freelancer, and finding that freelancer was like finding a needle in a haystack in a little bit of a way, just because same deal, like I got recommendations from a ton of different people, but you just want to find that right fit in terms of your working styles, like how often you want to be talking. Are they going to do the creative? Are you going to do the creative? How often are they updating your ads? Like, how do you decide on budget? How do you pay them? I think you'll notice out there a lot of people will do this like whatever. They'll do like a performance-based fee, which sometimes is frustrating if you're like running a sale or something. It's like you're getting paid because we're running a sale, not because you have figured out some secret sauce. So like I think figuring out the right payment structure is so important. So I would say all in all, we still outsource it. It's not something we do in-house, although I would love it to be. So I think it is something that's going to be core to our business for a long time. But we are actually actively hiring for digital marketing, or performance marketing manager right now. So if we find that person, then perhaps it will move in-house. But right now we're working with a freelancer who we really like, and I'm happy to give recommendations or make introductions for anyone, of course.
That's awesome. And then we had one more question.
I need to say hi.
Oh,
I
hi,
knew Lindsey would have that one covered, but hey guys.
Hi, Liz. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? I know you're the social person and you've done such an awesome job.
No, I mean, I think Lindsey nailed it. Marketing is split so much between what Lindsey was talking on paid marketing and then kind of our social feed. And they're really two different beasts. A lot of times we'll kind of test the success of something on our natural feed. And if it's really resonating with our audience, we'll then try to turn it into an ad and replicate that success there. But it's a fun part of the business because it's something that we both work on that kind of touches both of our worlds.
Yeah, so Liz does like all of our organic stuff, like partnerships, anything brand oriented, so anything sort of visual that you see like on our Instagram feed, that's coming from Liz. And then anytime there's like a paid kind of like, you know, return that we're kind of looking for a certain return on ad spend or whatever it is, it's more of the like a paid marketing side of the business. That's what I touch. So it's fun because we collaborate. We truly collaborate on everything at the company, but this is a place where we're talking about it together all day long.
That's great. And we, here's a question. Thank you so much, Liz. And okay, here's another question. So we'd love to hear how you manage a team and preserve your company culture in multiple locations as you continue to grow your business. That's a great question.
Yeah, this is something we're constantly working on, I'll admit. And I think it's something we both feel is so important just because culture is so important. And we've both worked at a lot of jobs and we've had good jobs and bad jobs. And I think everyone knows what that feels like. And we want everyone to love working at Weezie. So it's something we care a lot about. When we started the company, I was in New York and Liz was in Savannah. And we were sort of like growing the team in both places. And our thinking was, you know, we don't know if this is going to work. We'll just try it. If it works, we'll figure it out. It's not a big deal. And then like when things started working, it was like, okay, like we need to like make some plans to get people in the same place because this is not sustainable, which is what prompted myself and the New York team to move down to Atlanta, or depending on the role, Atlanta or Savannah. So the way we have it structured today is that Liz is based in Savannah and our creative team is there. So our physical product person, our social media person, creative graphic designer there. Our operations, as I mentioned, are there, although that will be moving to Atlanta eventually. And then everyone else is in Atlanta with me, which is operations, customer experience, what else? I guess just ops and CX right now, and brand marketing. So it's definitely a little bit of a juggling act. I would say if you can be in the same place, do it. But it works for us. So we are constantly on Slack. As I mentioned before, we have Zooms. Whenever we have phone calls, we try to make them Zooms just so we kind of like keep that face-to-face connectivity. Before COVID, we were traveling all the time. So it felt like every other week we were with one another, whether it be in New York or in Savannah, and that will only be made easier now that I'm in Atlanta, much closer and can actually drive. So I think, it's difficult, but for us, like whenever we are together, we do team dinners. We have like Zoom happy hours. We do a weekly all team check-in. So every Monday, the whole team gets on Zoom and runs through what they're working on that week, no matter your role at the business. We just think it's important that everyone is plugged into what everyone's doing since we're not physically together. And then we also have a monthly all hands meeting, which is a bit longer and really is for kind of like the team leads to walk through, here's what went down last month, here are my goals for the next month, like here's where I might have fallen short on my goals, or here's where I achieved my goals. And I think, again, just like having that connectivity with one another kind of scheduled on the calendar has been really important for us now that we're not all together.
Yeah.
Well, Lindsey, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. And Liz, thank you for being on the call too. We've loved hearing the story about Weezie and getting to hear about how you've built your business. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that.
Yeah, they've given us a special coupon code. So if you want to buy a fun robe or towels that your teenagers will steal, then you'd use the code The Wealth Edit at checkout, and it'll work through the end of August. The only thing it doesn't work on is the pre-discount bundles, which are always on sale, which is such a perk. So anyway, thank you so much. And we're so glad. Thank you again. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thanks everyone. And please don't hesitate to reach out with anything else.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.